All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our monthly entrepreneur coffee break. My name is Carol Spicer. I'm the owner of Spicer Facilitation and Learning. I'm very pleased to welcome you to our coffee break. For those that are new, I'll give you a little snippet of what the coffee break is all about. It started about 2 years ago, actually 3 years ago in 2020. In January, I started as a partnership with Navigate out of Grenfell, and we started doing a virtual coffee break as a pilot because not everyone could get down to Quarterbrook to meet in the coffee shops. Sometimes, business is busy and we don't get a chance to do that. So we started offering it as a pilot in January 2020. We all know what happened after our 3-month pilot was planned and March 2020 hit. So we continued in the virtual space. And the benefit of virtual is that we reach beyond the Western area and we get to meet with and connect with people all across the province and all the way up to the big land and everywhere in between. And so Navigate and I had a partnership for about 2 years, and they would sponsor our coffee break and we would promote it and attract people and get guest speakers. And they changed their mandate, a little bit of their focus last fall. So now I go after sponsors each and every month. And I've been very fortunate that people are willing to sponsor each of these coffee breaks. And I'm continuing to bring it as long as people want to gather. As I do think that the research says that entrepreneurs thrive when they connect with each other and with others in that support ecosystem. And so I think it's valuable. And so as long as you folks are willing to join me once in a while on a virtual call, then I will continue to offer it because this is what I do. I love connecting with people. So that's a little bit about what the Entrepreneur Coffee Break is. So really, this is your community. It's an opportunity for you to meet others, to promote your businesses or your organizations. If you connect and support us, we need those organizations that support entrepreneurs as well. I'm going to do a little poll in a moment. I'm going to ask you where you're joining from, but I will let you know that I'm joining you from the beautiful community of Pasadena on the West Coast. And I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that Pasadena is in the unceded territory of the ancient Beothuk. And I ask that you think about where you're joining us from and acknowledge with respect all the diverse cultures and traditions of all Indigenous people, and especially those in our province. And we have 5 different communities. We have the Mi'kmaq, the Beothuk, the Inuit, Innu, and Southern Labrador Inuit. And so I ask you to think about that as we do that. So I'm trying something new, and I'm trying a little poll. You should be seeing on your screen, there's 2 things you can do. You can open up a browser and go to slido.com, or if you have a camera, you can hold it up to the QR code. So if you've got a phone or an iPad or something, just hold it to that QR code. And I'm hoping that you will be able to enter. There we go. I like it when it works. Awesome. Look at that. We're all kinds of corners of the province. So this is kind of the quirky stuff that gets me excited. So thank you for that. And using technology, I'll just give a quick example of how you can incorporate this in some of the things that you do. I'm doing some engagement activities right now with Halapu with students in high school, and we need to measure some learning and some of our conversations we're having with them. So I knew for sure that no student is ever going to stop and fill out a paper form. So I stand up with QR codes and I go, here, come here, scan this and answer a couple questions. And then they all stop and they scan and they do it. So it's quick and easy, and it's a nice little way to do it. Jennifer, do you have a couple where you're seeing chat? You're not seeing any images of people? If you have the view icon next to your chat, you might be able to change it to show who people are there. Were they? Interesting. You can't see me either. Might be something to do with the way the view layout is. If it's, you want to try to find the gallery, because that shows everyone, or it should show everyone for you. Nigel just showed up. Well, that's cool. We're all going to slowly come onto your screen, perhaps. So hopefully that will work for you at some point. Okay, awesome. So thank you, folks. So for the purpose of our speakers and those that are joining us, you can see that we're from St. John's all the way up to Goose Bay, and some points along in between. So very pleased to welcome you here today. I do encourage you, I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves at some point and promote your organizations. However, in the meantime, if you want to go to chat and put in your name, your organization, any contact information, then I do a follow-up letter to my newsletter subscriber list, and I will highlight each of you and give your contact information if you're willing to do that. And just promote who you are and that you were joining us today. So our sponsor today, as I mentioned, I'm going after sponsors each month. So today is Edwina Bateman. She's with Avail HR. She's actually in a session right now until noon, so she's going to be popping on it when she's done that. Edwina is based in Port aux Basques, and she provides HR training to organizations. And when her and I were talking about this particular coffee break, she's just come through the Hurricane Fiona impacts down in her region, obviously, and she became the donation coordinator for the community. And so we ended up talking a little bit about being a volunteer in your community while you're a business owner. And I know personally, I find it's very different than when I had a full-time job. When I had a full-time job, I worked at my job and then I volunteered, and it was like very distinct. And I found it was Carol at work and Carol in the community. Now, as a business owner, and Edwina and I were both chatting about that, saying how now this seems really blurred. Where I'm not working 8:30 to 4:30, sometimes I'm volunteering at 10 in the morning somewhere, and sometimes I'm volunteering as a business owner, and sometimes I'm volunteering as me, or it's a passion project. And so we started having this conversation, and we thought, hey, let's chat to some other folks and see what they think about that. And before I introduce our guests, I'm going to ask you this next question. So if you still have your Slido open, it should continue. Your next poll should have come up. If not, you can scan again. And we'll just talk a little bit about volunteering. And then I'm going to introduce our guests that are here with us today. Again, if the scanning isn't working, then you can go to slido.com and then enter in 2266986, and that should open up the poll for you as well. The website is slido.com, SLIDO.com. And when you get to your browser window, it should be asking you for a code, and the code is 2266986. Okay, see what happens. There we go. So generally speaking, all of you are interested in volunteering, some not as often as you are able to, but certainly some pretty significant responses there on volunteering. So our panel today, we have two of our three guests, because again, our third panelist is currently working her I don't know if it's her side hustle. She has a business. She's also a teacher. She also volunteers. So she's going to try to get out of class to join us momentarily, and before lunchtime, I guess, to try and connect. So Laura Lee LeDrew will be joining us momentarily. But with us, I do have Richard Lewis and Nigel Jenkins. And I'm going to turn it over to Richard first. If you just want to introduce yourself, Richard, and let folks know who you are, then I'll ask Nigel to do the same, and then we can start our conversation.
Thanks, Carol. Yeah, sure. So Richard Lewis, founder and president of Integro Business Management. So Integro provides management consulting services to Indigenous businesses, social enterprises, and not-for-profit organizations throughout Atlantic Canada. Formerly, I guess I was involved and worked with the Nunavut Development Corporation, which is the business development arm of the Nunavut Community Council, and I'm also a proud member of the Nunavut Community Council. And I currently live in Happy Valley Goose Bay with my wife and 2 young kids.
Excellent, thank you. Richard and I met when he contacted me to support a project that he was doing with NLEDA, the Newfoundland and Labrador Indigenous Tourism Association, which is my first exposure to the fact that we actually do have 5 Indigenous communities in our province. And it was really fascinating to watch them come together. It actually reminded me of the craft brewing industry. They don't see themselves as competitors. How can we work together to make things better? And so it was a great experience. Now, Nigel, I met as we both ended up on a panel. We were up at Grenfell and we were a panel of speakers, and now I've got Nigel back as a panel. And they were asking us about using social media and technology, and Nigel started rhyming off platforms and apps and things I'd never ever heard before in my life. But you'll find out why he uses all of these different technologies. So Nigel, if you want to let folks know who you are.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to be here with you this morning, moving into the afternoon. I'm Nigel Jenkins, and I founded a company called Laughing Heart Music in 2015. So I had been a lawyer prior to that, got called to the bar in Newfoundland and Labrador and then Nova Scotia, but couldn't really hack it as a lawyer long term, or didn't see myself hacking it long term. So I took an early retirement and started into artist management in 2015. So I grew up playing in bands and had lots of friends who were active in the music industry. From there, the company grew to add record label and music publishing divisions in 2017. And now we represent a roster of about a dozen artists, primarily from Atlantic Canada, but some right across Canada, in those 3 divisions, and are in the process of opening up an arts hub here in Corner Brook. So the company bought 62 Broadway, which was most recently Tweed, the home of Tweed, but Scotiabank before that. And we're partnering with the Rotary Arts Center on the project. So on the main floor, we've got our offices, our event space, our co-working space. And on the lower level, the Rotary Arts Center is going to be building out a visual arts space, a recording studio, and a general purpose sort of rehearsal, multi-use kind of space. So lots of big projects on the go. We're a team of 6 right now, with a couple more full-time folks coming on, and lots happening. Too many hats on the volunteer front, but I'm sure we'll get into that.
Awesome. Thank you, Nigel. Yes, very exciting things happening in the arts world and on the West Coast with your new center. I think that's fantastic. So because we've got a smaller group, and maybe for the benefit of our guests, I think I'm going to run down through and ask each of you to introduce yourself, and then gives them a bit of an idea of who we've got with us. I'm going to run alphabetically by first name from the top of the list, or how you're listed in there, because sometimes it's last name. So Amy, you're up first, and then it's going to be Ben.
Hi everyone, Amy Burridge here. I'm with the Memorial Center for Entrepreneurship. So I'm not currently an entrepreneur myself, but I work with a lot of our student entrepreneurs on the early engagement side. And also my role is really focused on increasing our gender diversity into our programming. So Nigel, we haven't met yet, but I know we've been in touch via different programs that we have. My goal in really attending today was really just to be exposed to more local entrepreneurs on the scene. We're always looking for keynote speakers and mentors and connections to the local ecosystem for our students. So I was hoping to just keep in touch with all the different networking things that are on the go. And this is a great way to meet people outside of St. John's. I'm from the West Coast myself, so it's great to see a good representation there. And even though we are based at the St. John's campus, we actually serve students at all of the Memorial campuses. So Harlow, Corner Brook, Marine Institute, and the St. John's campus. So that's a bit about me.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. Welcome. Ben, it's been a long time. We met back at Grenfell many, many years ago, I think at a startup weekend.
Yes, It has been a few years, Carol, but I'm glad to have received the invite and happy to be here. I'll also give Janice will introduce herself as well.
Okay.
So my name is Ben Wiper. I'm founder of 3F Waste Recovery. We take fish farm and forest byproducts and then apply and create technologies to turn them into high value nutraceuticals, cosmetics, and pharma products. We're focusing on the codfish here in Newfoundland, and we've developed a lineup of seafood composts for northern and climate growing, as well as a lineup of pet treats under the Coliskins brand, which Janice will tell you about. And most importantly, we've got the world's first process to make pharmaceutical grade fish collagen at scale. So we're in scale up mode now. Lots of traction in pet. You'll find our treats in every Sobeys in Atlantic Canada. And we're really happy to be doing this in rural communities in Newfoundland. Janice?
And you're up on the Northern Peninsula, are you right, Ben?
Yes, yeah. Between
Yeah.
Maine, Rodington, Hawke's Bay, we got different production sites for different products.
Okay, awesome.
So hi, I'm Janice and I'm the CEO of Coliskins. So yeah, we're in over 100 stores Canada-wide right now, from coast to coast, Vancouver right across Newfoundland. I'm actually speaking at the Circular Economy Leadership of Canada Summit next month in Toronto. So I'm super excited for that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. Jillian, I'm going to go to you next because you came in as your last name, so you're a B, and then Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jill Benson. I work with BDC. So we're Canada's development bank. We work with entrepreneurs providing financing and advisory services. So similar to Amy's comment, I'm not an entrepreneur myself, but do work with entrepreneurs on a daily basis and kind of across all industries and stages of development. So I ran into Carol and we had met over time at an Enlow event not too long ago. And she was kind enough to invite me to join today's discussion. I'm based in Paradise. Over the last year and a half, I have been working with clients on the West Coast of Labrador, covering for a colleague who was on medical leave. I'm mostly in like the mid-market space, like the 2 to 3 million to 10 million space. You might know my colleague Renee Wheeler, based in Corner Brook, who deals with our smaller segment clients. And we've just hired actually John George on the West Coast as well, so we'll have some more boots on the ground there, and I'll be kind of immersing myself more back into the East Coast market. But we certainly all work together to do our best to support entrepreneurs across the island.
Awesome. Excellent. So glad you could join us. Jennifer and then Kelly.
I'm not sure if you can hear me or
We
see
can.
me.
We can see both. Do both.
Yeah, I'm trying to reduce my network so I'm not freezing up here. Yeah. So I'm Jennifer Whalen. I work with Community Business Development Corporation in the Green Bay region. So I cover about 40 communities. And similar to Jill and Amy, we help entrepreneurs. I'm not an entrepreneur yet. I want to be, as work is so busy. So we help business startups and with advisory and training as well. I've been with CBDC for 15 years now, 9 years as the executive director. And I've met Carol on several occasions. Latest was Enlow, but she's certainly been a big part of CBDCs with our AGMs as well. So it's good to be here. It's I enjoy this networking part of it and getting to know, and very interesting. The ones that have already spoke. These are companies I wasn't aware of, so it's good to hear about these new organizations that I can certainly pass along resources to clients of ours.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I get to see you in June in Port aux Basques. I'm going to be joining you guys down there, which is awesome.
Oh, great. Great. I
Yep.
got the agenda out, but I haven't really went through it fully yet. So for sure you're there.
Well, I'm going to be with you on a Friday morning, and then I'm going to be driving to Gander for Terry Lynn when she introduces herself that afternoon. So it's exciting times for me for sure. Kelly and then Terry Lynn.
Hi everyone, I'm Kelly Lannon and currently on my second week of my 6-week work term to finish off my diploma in business marketing. And my intent is to, when I'm finished, start my own marketing and event planning business. I was doing event planning and programming with the town of Pasadena up until the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit, of course, there's no programs happening and no events happening. So I took it as an opportunity to go back to school and actually get the diploma to go along with all my experience. And that's where I am today.
Awesome. So glad you could join us. Kelly keeps trying to get into these things and just her family life pulls her away, and like all of us, right?
Yeah.
And Terry Lynn, who's logged in as NLFA executive, which is her volunteer role, but she is actually an entrepreneur.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Terry Lynn Robbins, and I am a co-owner of Robbins Family Farm in Deer Lake here. And we are a multi-commodity farm, meaning that we raise several different types of livestock. Our primary focus is food production and agriculture awareness and education. So we have a large number of children's programs that we do, farm camp for kids, that sort of thing. And the primary goal is, again, raising awareness about agriculture in Newfoundland and Labrador, and to educate people about where their food comes from. And I guess the other hat I wear, as Carol said, is I sit on the executive for the Newfoundland and Labrador Federation of Agriculture, and I chair the Newfoundland and Labrador Agriculture in the Classroom program.
Excellent. Thank you. Awesome. All right. So let's get into our conversation. So Nigel, you kind of gave me a bone to grab onto there. You said you got too many hats of volunteers. So what are some of the things that you volunteer at?
Yeah, so I guess the main roles are focused within my industry. So I'm the chair of the board for Music NL currently. I got invited onto the board 2 years ago. They started me off as vice chair with the intention of transitioning me into the chair role once the current chair had stepped down, which happened not this most recent December, but 2 Decembers ago. I sit on the board for the East Coast Music Association. So that is the music industry association for the 4 Atlantic provinces. So I am the voted on Newfoundland and Labrador rep. So the way that board works is each of the Atlantic Canadian Music Industry Associations gets a seat, and then each of the provinces are able to vote on another rep for the province. So I got voted onto that board also about 2 years ago. I sit on the advisory board for the Navigate incubator here in Corner Brook. I was a client of Navigate's when I first moved back home to Corner Brook in 2018, and was able to take advantage of the office space they offered, the support through Billy Newell at the time, and then Allison Rowe more recently, some of their funding. And so when they asked me to sit on the advisory board, I absolutely could not say no. I believe in the mission and vision of that place and have directly benefited from it myself. And then, I mean, sort of a volunteer role, but I'm also a town councillor in Steadybrook. So we do get paid about $600 a quarter. So
about 10 cents an hour.
About 10 cents an hour. So yeah, partially volunteer, partially paid role. And then beyond that, I mean, I do all sorts of sort of free consults, free mentorships, paid mentorships with folks. So it's been an important part of how I've grown my business, built my network, stayed involved in the community, and given back as I've been able to, as my own sort of company and skill sets have been growing.
Awesome. Excellent. Richard, what about yourself? What are some of the things you're involved in as a volunteer?
Yeah, so involved in a few volunteer organizations. I like to say during the winter months that my volunteer / part-time job is a minor hockey coach. My kids are 8 and 6. So I coach both the under 9 and under 7 divisions, which is really about 10 hours a week for 6 or 7 months of the year. So that eats up a lot of my time during the winter months. Also on the board of directors for the Battle Harbour Historic Trust. I'm sure most people here are familiar with Battle Harbour. Obviously a big fan of that organization and that place, and like to visit there each and every year. And that place is very close to my heart for sure. Also, have served as a volunteer on the Trappers Running Club, which is a local running club here in Happy Valley Goose Bay. And previously, as Nigel is now, I was a town councillor in my home community of Cartwright before I relocated to Happy Valley Goose Bay. It was completely volunteer for us, Nigel. We didn't even get the $600 per quarter benefits.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, a former president of the Recreation Committee in Cartwright when I was there as well. One of the things I found very challenging when I lived in my home community of Cartwright after I moved back from St. John's was you felt almost an obligation to be involved in every organization on the ground there because the community was only 500 people. So you felt like if you didn't volunteer and if you weren't involved, then the community will be left short. The impact that had on our family, I guess, was that by the time we left Cartwright, we were almost burnt out. We lived there for 6 or 7 years. So my wife and I made a conscious decision after we moved to Goose Bay to kind of take a step back for a year or two before we decided to get involved with organizations again. So we've kind of been over that hump now after moving to Happy Valley Goose Bay, and we're happy to get involved in the community as well. Also, like Nigel, then there's the whole business side of our volunteer work. So we do a bunch of pro bono work for not-for-profit organizations, especially. I've tried to, I guess, ingrain a sense and importance in volunteerism right across our organization, and it's a non-negotiable KPI for all of our staff to dedicate at least 1 hour per month to a community initiative. And I encourage folks to surpass those goals. And I think I know that we all do because we just like to align ourselves and to hire people who, this is just a part of who they are. And that's really important to us as a business. So I think on the personal side, certainly involved in a bunch of things, but then I've tried to sort of intermingle that into our business operations as well.
Awesome. So there's a couple things there, Richard, that kind of jumped at me. One about the burnout. And I know Terry Lynn and I have had this conversation because she's probably paid about 3 cents an hour of the volunteer work that she does with the Federation, only because they've had some staffing challenges over the last couple of years. So the executives take it on a lot. So that burnout, and I think, Richard, you touched on, I'm thinking of the smaller communities, not to discount St. John's and Paradise, of course, but Steadybrook's pretty small. I'm sure most of the community knows Nigel. Pasadena's pretty small. You know, people start to get to know who I am in the community, and certainly Cartwright being even smaller. That obligation of wanting to contribute can lead to burnout for sure.
Yeah. And it's sometimes what I found difficult, especially when I lived in Cartwright, was saying no. And I couldn't say no at that time. And I think after living in St. John's for 6 or 7 years, and I kind of lost that sense of community in a way, and I didn't feel as close or as integral to the city of St. John's because it's just so massive. Whereas then when we moved back to Cartwright, we said, okay, we're going to really make a difference in our community now. And we did that for 6 or 7 years before we moved to Happy Valley Goose Bay. But yeah, it was just understanding the position that Cartwright was in as a community, and there's about 450 people there or 500 people. We felt it was an obligation, but we wanted to do it, but we said, okay, we have to do it because, you know, if we don't organize hockey at the rec center, then the kids aren't going to have that as an opportunity. Or if we don't organize a recycling drive to raise money for the grad class, then the grad class will be short. So I think when you're in a small community, you almost feel like you don't have the luxury to pick your spots or to pick your initiatives that you want to volunteer towards.
That's a good point too.
Yeah.
So I do want to welcome Laura Lee. Laura Lee, I told them that you were the epitome of all of our conversation today because you're working at a job, you have a business, and you're volunteering. So we're just kind of getting into the conversation. So if you want to let folks know who you are, and the question I've asked so far is, what are some of the things that you do as a volunteer on top of all the other things that you do?
Okay, well, hello everybody. I'm Laura Lee LeDrew. I own a farm stay B&B in Cormac, Newfoundland, which is a whole lot of work on its own. But I also, and this is where I'm to today, I'm in a classroom teaching advanced and academic maths to grade 12. So this is what I do to create an income on the side of my business because my business is still new and we're growing. But as a volunteer, I volunteer in many different capacities within the community. So for the past 12 years, I've been heavily engaged with recreation initiatives, and just listening to the voice there before me, I'm not sure who it was, I'm sorry. But speaking about recreation in the communities, it's such an essential a turning point for health and well-being, and just that community, that sense of community and belonging. So I've been volunteering in many different capacities for recreation. I am currently a town council member as well, so I'm able to grow that capacity and help delegate more duties to help grow our recreation within our small town. Our town only has about 500 people, so it is relatively small. And I know that was just referenced as well, that small community and that sense of belonging. And then I also in newly a board member of a newly founded organization for our Heritage Society within the community as well. And that's to just grow the awareness and acknowledgement of the historical significance of our community, which a lot of people in the region had no idea about the history of our community, even though it's not that old. So it's just telling those stories. And so I help volunteer to, we're going to see what happens with it, but to help grow the community events, the events for non-residents and things like that, to help grow the understanding of the historical significance of our community. So, and of course, through my business, I do, I have a farm to table dinner where a percentage of all the proceeds from that goes directly to that Heritage Society to help grow the funds for that pot. I also I'm working with Indigenous communities right now to curate new developments and new experiential opportunities where the proceeds, again, will be going directly to those communities for different ongoing initiatives there. So even through my business, we do different things. And of course, my farm business is very focused on environmental sustainability and things like that. And these are all things, when you put them all together, they all have a sense of well-being and belonging to community. And so those things are important to me. And as a small town person, those things wouldn't exist without volunteers. So I know that significance, and that's why I commit to doing it. And when Carol asked me to join this call with the importance of volunteerism and I've only been at it for 12 years, but there's already a significant decrease of those volunteers. And the ones that volunteer, you often hear they do everything. The ones that do something do everything. Those people are tired. They can't do everything anymore. Some of them are no longer physically or mentally able to do those things anymore. So I've stepped up to do some of those things. And it's nice to see some more people stepping up. And I'm hoping that with these initiatives growing, more and more people will step up. But at the same time, we need to acknowledge that not all of this should be based on volunteers, and try to get funding in place to help elevate the stress and the responsibilities of volunteer by putting these funding initiatives, even though we're doing it as a volunteer, getting these funding initiatives in place to allow employees to take over these positions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting is what you and Richard have both talked about. I know we see in our community the old 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the people are volunteering and they're at everything. They're at the Strawberry Fest, they're at the Santa Claus Parade, they're at the community breakfast, they're at all of it. And so absolutely burnout, as both you and Richard have alluded to, is something to be really careful to watch. Something I want to pick up on, Nigel, that you mentioned, you said about growing your business. And this is where this is kind of interesting for me today, because as I sort of said at the top, when I worked full-time at a job, Monday to Friday, volunteering really wasn't connected to my day-to-day job. I wasn't asked to volunteer because of my job. And yet, as a business owner, Carol's being asked, okay, well, which Carol are you looking for? And then Nigel, you said, you've actually grown your business, and a lot of the volunteer opportunities that you've shared are certainly directly connected to your business. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that sort of flows and works? And
yeah, I maybe can illustrate with a really specific example. So my volunteer time on the Music NL board, especially since I've stepped into the role of chair, has seen me in rooms, lots of rooms and conversations with the province, talking about plans they're making for, the arts sector, the music sector more specifically, which has led to relationship development with, a number of ministers and the folks who work with them, which, when I started the Arts Hub, or when we got the building in December of 2022, had a meeting with one of those ministers, filled him in on the plan, and was able to apply directly to his department for funding to support the space. And we got almost $1 million grant to help pay for, 4 full-time positions over the next 3 years, marketing, conference and speaker fees, all kinds of stuff. And I attribute that directly to the volunteer work I have done with the Music NL board and the relationships that has allowed me to develop. So, yeah, it's tough. There's a big sort of push against, and I'm sure many of you have heard this, a lot of artists are asked to play for exposure. And, there's the classic comeback line that, well, people die from exposure every day. But in this case, the exposure that these volunteer hours have given me have been more than compensated for indirectly by the opportunities that have been created from them. So, I feel very time poor right now. I work from 8 to 5, and I'm pretty hard about stopping at 5 because I go home, make supper. My wife and I have a 2.5-year-old, so we do supper time, and then I do his bath time. My wife does his bedtime stories, and then it's 7, 8 o'clock, and I'm off, to a town council meeting or to a board virtual Zoom meeting or something. So, that the benefits so far for me have outweighed it, but this feeling of sort of time poorness, time poverty, burnout is just always lingering in the background for me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ben's made a comment, a double-edged sword. Do you want to expand on that a little bit, Ben?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. So it was the comment there about, the relationships built through volunteering and some of the, I guess, side benefits of that. That's beneficial for some, but it comes at the cost of others. And sometimes it results in, I'm not saying in this case I'd have no facts of the matter, but in other cases that I think we all know of in the province, you can get favors. Basically 20 people make all the decisions in the province, essentially every spending decision of impact. And what that means is that not necessarily objective merit-based reasoning is used. And it also, the other problem I find with volunteering is oftentimes the crab pot syndrome is very bad in our communities. Anyone who tries to stand out or excel or be different basically gets piled on by a lot of the community for being different, for trying, for putting out an effort, for maybe change perhaps. So I see those two things as connected, building relationships to ease the change, but at the same time, I think oftentimes some of these things can lead to less than objective decision making that ultimately harms our communities in the end.
I think it certainly could. It's funny, you said 20 people making decisions. Somebody had a conversation with me yesterday who said there's only 6 families in the world that run the world. So, it's kind of an interesting.
Well, I mean, just here, like, you literally can fit the 6 people who control 90% of our province's fish in a minivan.
Yeah, and certainly we're seeing a lot of unsettled.
Same thing with the forestry industry. Same thing with the agricultural industry. That disproportionate power is really a problem for startups in this province.
It certainly can be, yeah. And I think I kind of see where Nigel's going with. I know for me, my business relies on word of mouth, and so building those relationships and building those connections, I always would like to think, and I've actually had this conversation with Terry Lynn, because the Federation's been a client and we're friends. But I know that she doesn't hire me with the Federation hat as a friend. She's hiring based on the skill that I can bring. Maybe the friend got me to the table to pitch, to say, hey, here's who I am, but still it's the merit of the work that, carries you through. You might get the first job, but you don't get the second job if you don't kind of do a good job there too. But yeah, I'm all about the relationships too, Nigel. I think the volunteering stuff, but it can get tricky. Like when I look at Navigate, they've been a client of mine. I've been a client of theirs. We've been partners. I do volunteering for them at the startups. Like it's a very tangly relationship, as you connect with people. Richard, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about something that Nigel said about being very time poor. So I'm in the same in the same boat. One of the things I really struggle with is saying no to volunteer opportunities. I feel like I'm getting better at that. But at such an early and growth stage of your business, and Nigel, I don't know if it's the same for you. I'm still very much a technician in my business. We have a team of 4. I'm still working in the business more than on the business, which I'm taking steps to address that. But until our business reaches the next stage, that really limits the time that I can dedicate to volunteer organizations. So as much as I would love to give more back, and there's all kinds of really exciting opportunities coming across our desk and my desk personally to give back to your community or your broader community. It's really a struggle for me to say no, but I mean, I'm getting better at that. But how does everyone else navigate that conversation in their own heads in terms of, do I take on this volunteer capacity? Do I turn it down? And if so, why?
Anyone want to jump in? You can.
I'm happy. Oh, sorry, Laura Lee, you go. I see your hand up.
Laura Lee, go ahead.
I've definitely can agree with what you're saying, and I, like you, have been learning to say no, but I've also been very actively calling people out, because I felt, and talk about time poor, I've definitely felt that. But I've felt that, especially recently, post-COVID, I guess you could say, a lot of people have been very adamant and very outspoken about putting all kinds of demands on people who are already volunteering and people who, and I like to make the reference, it's like I'm cold butter and life, my time right now is soft bread, right? And so when people do that to me and they said, why aren't we doing this? How come you're not doing this? Why don't we do this? And I'm like, well, why don't you step up and do it? But you know what? It's not happening because nobody's doing it. Just do it. You want to see it? Do it. Because I'm doing what I want to do and I'm doing what I see needs to be done. And I have a motto. And part of the thing about volunteering and entrepreneurship, both in the same hand, is there's a tendency, especially when you're new and you're starting out, and maybe it's because I'm a teacher, I don't have that struggle, but there's a tendency to, because you can do it, because you can do it so well, is to kind of take over and do things yourself instead of delegating those duties. And so I don't mind delegating duties. And I have a motto that if somebody's doing that job, let them do it. Even if you can do it better, let them do it because there's lots of jobs to be done. So to answer your question, when it comes to how do you say no, I just turn it back on them and it's like, why don't you do it? Why don't you step up? Why don't you volunteer? Because I'm really sick and tired of, and I'm sorry if this isn't a negative connotation, it's not meant to be, but I'm really sick and tired of people telling me how to volunteer when I'm a leader in my community. And if they want something done, I highly recommend they do it themselves because we need more people doing that.
Good point. Nigel, you were going to jump in on that one too.
Yeah, I mean, this year is really the first time I've started saying no actively. I'm at my capacity, and I know that. And so I've been asked, there are a couple of boards recently I've been asked to join that I've just had to say no flat out to. And I'm trying to be thoughtful now too about how I scale back and step down from some of the opportunities or some of the roles I'm currently serving in. Some of them will expire naturally. My ECMA board tenure is for 2 years anyway, so that will expire this year. And I just won't want to run for re-election. I think for me, it was 2 or 3 years ago, I very intentionally set out to get involved in as much as possible. And I'm paying for that now, but I've learned and I've pushed myself to my limit. So I know where that is. And after this year, as things sort of naturally reset, I'll know going forward, okay, I'm on 1 or 2 boards, plus my own business related volunteer time. So that's it. So if I get asked for new opportunities or to join new boards, no matter how exciting they might be, it's just going to have to be no, because I'm like you, Richard, and like you, Laura Lee, it sounds like, I'm really compelled to say yes to things because I love people and I love helping people and I love being involved. And the kind of energy you get around with folks who like to be involved in things is wonderful and contagious. Yeah. And so maybe I'm a bit of an addict too. Maybe that's part of my issue. But I've started saying no, and I'm in the process of scaling back because you find your limit and you've got to accept it and work within it.
I've
Yeah.
tried to align myself, Nigel, and so I think your daughter, you said, is only 2.5 yet, but as the kids get older and they're involved in different sports and organizations, I've tried to involve myself in what their interests are. So minor hockey it started with.
Yeah.
My wife now is president of Valley Dance because my daughter is really into dance. So we've kind of tried to kill two birds with one stone and still giving back to our family and what our kids' interests are, but giving
Yeah.
back to the broader community as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's a great idea.
Awesome. My husband just says I'm nosy. He said, you sit on all these boards because you're nosy. You just want to know what's going on. You know what? In some cases, there's a tiny little bit of truth to that.
Yeah.
Kelly.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to the fact that, like you guys all say, burnout is a real thing, and it actually happened to me. I moved to Pasadena back in, let's see, 99. My boys were 1, 2, and 3 months old when we moved here. So I had a really young family, and the first thing I did was walk into our recreation center with 3 kids attached to me and said, hey, how can I help? And everybody was like, oh my God, you got 3 kids, you want to help? But I was like, yeah, that's what I do, I help. And from that day forward, I was like involved in as much as I could get involved in, because it helped me to become part of the community. And then what I found was I volunteered so much that it was starting to turn me off from things. So I didn't want to be out in the public anymore. I didn't want to be, because every time you went somewhere, somebody said, oh, you like to volunteer, so you could do this. And I had a hard time saying no. And then I was getting to the point where I was sitting on committees and there wasn't any growth in the committee. The committee would stay stagnant, and people that were on the committee were on the committee for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And they never wanted change. And it's like, well, we always did it this way. And so then I was getting frustrated and thinking, well, why am I volunteering? Because it's not making any difference. And then it started to become negative for me. So I found in the last, probably 2 years before COVID, that I had quit all my volunteering. And it negatively, in fact, impacted me personally, because it was something I had always enjoyed, but now it was something like, this is a big struggle here. So now that COVID's over and things are getting back, I'm slowly starting to insert myself back into the volunteer things that I want to be involved in. So, but burnout is definitely a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, and Richard, you touched on hiring people, that aligns with your values around volunteering. And it's interesting because I don't know of an entrepreneur that doesn't volunteer. It just seems to be something that's intrinsic. And some of it, yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest, some of it is not completely altruistic. I go down and do the startup weekend with Navigate because my name is out in the business community, like, I mean,
Yeah.
there's going to be some benefits, but at the same time, I also love helping people. So, it's filling my heart as well as, having a potential business impact is not guaranteed. But then there's the passion projects, right? And Richard, I hear you aligning with your family. For me, it's heritage. Laura Lee and I have had some conversations around heritage stuff. We just became incorporated. So now we had our first AGM on the weekend, and now we have bylaws, and now we're no longer just a group of passionate people. The challenge that in my head that I'm now struggling with is we just had elections, and I actually have a full board of 9 people. And now it's like, ooh, yay, but now I got to manage that. But at the same time, I also got to learn to delegate that.
Yep.
So what I've been doing for the last 8 years, okay, we got an event coming up. Can somebody go to Corner Brook and pick up something? Or while I'm in St. John's, I'll pick up something. And oh my God, I got to do the minutes and I got to do this. Well, now I actually have a secretary and I have a treasurer and I have, directors that now I'm going to have to figure out how to take that step back and be the chairperson, not be the worker bee and do it all too. And I think then, Richard, to your comment, if we all can kind of get to those roles where maybe we aren't so time poor, because I can actually delegate to some other people and the committee will function. And maybe I'll have that extra 20 minutes to spend with somebody else instead, so maybe it's not always about saying no necessarily. It's just setting those kind of parameters of how deeply involved we're going to be, right? Awesome. So we talked about some of the challenges and I guess some of the benefits, the exposure, the connection, the relationships. I think, Nigel, you touched on, those are some of the big benefits that you see in the volunteering work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess the driving force for the most part is to give back. Since starting my career in 2015, I've had so many people and organizations that have poured into me who I will not be able to, repay in any kind of a meaningful way. But so I try to pay that forward. I think about, Sherry Jones is an artist manager in Nova Scotia, really established artist manager who answered my first SurveyMonkey survey I sent out in January of 2015, trying to figure out if people needed support for their music businesses and their artists. And Sherry's been working since the 1990s with some of the biggest artists to come out of Atlantic Canada. And she filled out my survey and wrote me a very encouraging email and has been, supportive in all the years since. So I look up to people like that and aspire to that level of giving and giving back, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me too, it fills my heart, right? It's just, there's something that drives you. I think, Laura Lee, that's something that you and I have talked about as well.
Yeah, volunteering, like I said, in their community, especially smaller communities too, it's that sense of well-being, it's that sense of belonging. And a lot of times that's when you talk about our spiritual health, our mental health, and our emotional health, sometimes that sense of well-being, that sense of belonging is missing. Community volunteering definitely fills that gap for me. It connects me with members of our community. You look at intergenerational, you look at youth, people my age, and the fact that I'm able to bring these kinds of opportunities to the community members. The fact that people know me in my community without me having to go out of my way. Sometimes I don't remember everybody. There's only 500. I still can't remember them, but I feel like I belong in my community and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else because I volunteer and I'm a part of that community.
That's interesting. I had gone into our Legion host offered their space for us for our AGM. So I was going over doing a tech check and figuring out how we were going to step out and, do our event. One of them he's looking at me, he's going, Carol Spicer. You can know he's like running through his directory of who I am. And then someone said, well, so-and-so was her grandfather. And he's like, well, who's your father? And I mentioned my father's name. Well, no wonder you look familiar. You look just like your father. Okay. Yeah. So it is those connections. And that's the thing in small community too, that, you're probably somewhat related or connected or, there's those, that heritage in the community that follows you along sometimes, whether you want it or not.
Or even move there and you live in somebody's old house. They all know.
Yeah. So Laura Lee, maybe you could talk to that because Ben just asked a question. Are any of the entrepreneurs in the room not originally from Newfoundland? Because those benefits may not kind of fit. So I know Kelly's not originally from Newfoundland. Laura Lee, you've got some connections. I've got some connections, but I'm technically born in Ontario, conceived in Newfoundland. So that's where my roots go, but.
Not born, but you're bred.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I say too. I was born in Fort McMurray, but I'm living a stone throw away from where my mother grew up. I'm living the other direction. You throw a stone one way, it's where my husband's family's from. You throw a stone one way, that's where my mother's family. So I can't really speak to not being from Newfoundland, but if there's somebody else in the room, they can definitely speak to it because I feel like I'm from here.
Yeah.
I was born in Happy Valley Goose Bay. Sorry, Richard, I've been trying to find an opening to mention that.
Yeah.
My father was in the Air Forces for 20 years, so we moved around a lot. In 2001, my family moved to Steadybrook, and I lived in Newfoundland until 2010, and then from 2010 to 2018, I was in Halifax. So I've been away and come back and been away and come back. But because we grew up, moving around so much, when we finally did settle down to Steadybrook, that's the place that has felt most like home to me. So I've always identified as being from here, and I take a lot of pride in, having been born in Labrador and raised on the island part of the province. I feel like I've got both covered.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, like I said before, I'm from Nova Scotia, I was born there, lived there till we moved here. My husband was going back to school to do a 6-month course, and he said, and his parents had moved from the East Coast to Pasadena. And he said, well, we can go live with mom and dad while I do this course. And I said, well, I'm only going for 6 months. Like, you can't take me out of here for more than 6 months. Like, we got 3 small kids, not going to happen. And here we are 25 years later, we haven't moved since. So there's definitely something that draws you here and keeps you here. And like I said before, walking into the rec center to that group of parents with other small kids was the starting point for me, and that's where I met a lot of my connections was through the kids.
Yeah, and that's where volunteering, I think, can help people into community. We had a lady at our AGM on Saturday, and she's from England, and she came to me and she said, when we first moved here, I came to one of your events, one of your traditional skills events. She said, I met a woman who's now my best friend. And, we haven't been doing events for 3 years. So it's at least, 5 to 6 years ago that she met this person. And they're still in the community and they're best friends through, coming to one of our events. So even if we don't necessarily have those direct connections, it's all the indirect stuff that our contributions to the community can help forge some of those relationships too. So I think that's really important. And if you're new to a community, it's a way to get involved. If you get involved, you will start to meet people, and you'll start to meet, the same people sometimes. It's the same as going to networking events. I have a lady in Corner Brook who works at the college, and every time I go to a networking event, she goes, I knew you'd be here. She said, I see you everywhere. But I just see the power of networking. So I look for that. And it's interesting, Ben, because you are, what you're touching on, I think, is probably not just Newfoundland and Labrador specific. I think it's Atlantic Canada specific, that if you're from away, you're from away. My husband was born in Ontario, and his only connection is he married a woman born in Ontario who has Newfoundland roots. And so sometimes you could be here 30 years and still not be from here, So I would agree with you there. Sometimes it is a bit difficult to break into smaller communities specifically. Yeah.
And
Carol.
go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead. Sorry. I'll go next.
I was just going to say, you're right, Carol. And I feel that when I speak to people not from my community, and there's a number of people from Cormac that's not from Cormac, the ones that have a sense of belonging and a sense of community are the ones who are volunteering. The other ones that aren't from there, who haven't volunteered, who haven't been out to community events, they're always the first people to step up and say, how come we're not doing this? This place doesn't feel like community, not like the last place I lived in Newfoundland. And it's unfortunate, because if they could see themselves and could see that they weren't participating in community, then they would be able to, because they're seeking that feeling. They just don't know how to come across it. And you're right, Carol, volunteering is certainly a part of that. You can go ahead there now. Richard, I think it was.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment back to what Carol said earlier about our motives not being completely altruistic. And I agree. And I just thought there for a second, like, if I look at my role as a hockey coach, yes, you coach to provide an opportunity for the kids, but it also makes you feel real good when you see an 8-year-old at the grocery store and they come up and they're super excited to see you and they're like, hey coach, like that. It's hard to explain how that makes you feel, but it absolutely makes it easier to get back on the ice on a Monday at 5 o'clock when you've had a rough day at the office and you don't necessarily want to go, but it is that little bit of added motivation for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, sometimes it's personal satisfaction for sure, but sometimes it's filling that heart and soul. I go to some of the things that I do because I'm really passionate about that particular thing. And then sometimes there's the intangible benefits. I got off a phone call with a contractor last night. All I was asking was, when are you starting the job, and do I need to get the permit from the town, or are you getting it? And after 45 minutes of him rambling on his world philosophy, he then asked me for a quote to do a business plan for him for a new business idea. So I emailed him this morning saying, okay, like, you want to tell me what you're actually looking for so I can put together a quote for you? So like sometimes it's those chance collisions that come to things. Kelly and I have had that. We have these conversations because we've just accidentally met somewhere, and all of a sudden you're having this conversation, and oh, maybe we need to have a coffee on this one because it's a little bit more formal now. Let's take this further. So sometimes just being out and about, and my husband does this to me all the time because, you know, I talk and I said, well, now the fortunate thing is I get paid to talk for a living. So I get the benefit of that.
Well,
But, you know,
I-
Nigel, I look at your business and, you know, you've followed your passion. You said right off the top, you played music as a young, you know, as a young adult or as a child even, and now you're being able to make your passion into a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'll tell you, when I was 16, when I thought about what my passion was, I didn't envision, 12 hours sending emails a day. But I'm certainly working in an industry that I am passionate about. And I think the results of the work that we do for the artists we work with provide a lot of personal fulfillment and satisfaction, for sure.
Yeah. Kelly, you were going to jump in there a minute ago. Sorry, I think I cut you off.
That's okay. I was just going to say, it's funny that the other day, I'm a big idea person. I come up with all kinds of ideas, more ideas than you could ever shake a stick at. And it drives my husband crazy to most extents. But the other day we were going for a drive and I was telling him my big idea. And the first thing he said to me was, you got to sit down and talk to Carol. And he's never met Carol. I don't think he's ever met you personally, has he?
I don't think
But
so.
he just kind of, he's heard me talking about Carol and the connections that we've made. And he knows, I guess he knows enough from what I say of what Carol does that he's like, you have a really good idea here, but you should talk to Carol because she's the one that can help you get that idea forward. So if I didn't volunteer in the community, if I didn't meet people through through this community, I would never have met Carol and I would never be where I'm at today. I mean, I've made lots of connections. Like Ben said, I'm not from here. I have no roots from here. Even my husband's family are from the East Coast. So we had nothing that grounded us here, but it was the community itself that once we were connected, we really became part of it. My husband was a, softball coach for the high school teams. And like you say, it all starts from your kids because everything you do, your kids are going to be the main focus of what you're doing. And it helps to actually build that community around you.
Yeah, for sure. Ben, we're striking out with you, buddy. We don't know where to get you connected in. Counselor certainly would connect you to the community. Yes, absolutely. And I agree. I think, for a number of years when your children are younger, you become so-and-so's parent, right? You're known as Bobby's dad or Susie's mom or whatever it is. And I remember for me, the first time I went to Grenfell and somebody referred to me as my daughter's mother. And it was like, oh, life has come around now, right? Because she's an adult. My children are adults. And it was her campus. She was the undergrad. She was volunteering at the campus. She was getting known as campus. And even though the person knew me, they introduced me to somebody else, not as Carol. That's Heather's mom. And it was like, oh, that's kind of a neat shift. So those of you with the younger kids, you'll get to that point too, where they get their own identity and you're back to being their mom again, after you've established your own. But I don't want to forget about folks like Jillian and stuff, and the others that were on here earlier. When I started my business a couple of years ago, I didn't know there was such a thing as an entrepreneur ecosystem. And I started going to events and I started networking and I started finding out that there are people like Jillian who are their heart is totally in helping you be successful as a business owner. And that was the message I said at the startup weekend recently with Navigate was just get connected because there are a ton of people that want you to succeed. And it might just be the cheerleader in the corner with, having a conversation with Kelly to cheer her on. But it might be somebody that has a funding connection, or it might be somebody that has I'm just looking, Kelly, at you as events and Nigel starting an event center and your marketing and, you don't know, maybe there's an opportunity down the road and it's because you both happen to be on an event today. I've seen sales happen in chat, on our coffee breaks. Terry Lynn, who's dropped off, she didn't mention, but she has one of those community boxes. I know, Laura Lee, you do it as well, right? The food boxes, fresh produce and goods and stuff. I mean, I've seen sales happen in chat, You know, so sometimes it's just going out there and, you know, I've written articles on this in my newsletter. I don't drink coffee, but I go for coffee anytime.
Yeah, the thought occurred to me as you were talking, Carol. Like, I think a lesson I've learned through the various boards and volunteer roles is that people are really the key to anything you want to do and accomplish. And you don't build those relationships and connections sitting at home, you know, waiting for people to find you. You've got to go out into the world, and you get so much energy, I think. And so, you know, even before the start of this conversation, like, I had a pretty bad headache. I was feeling low energy, and just hear what everybody has to say, I'm feeling better now. You know, it's
Awesome.
it's healing to be amongst people too. And yeah, and I try to say that in a way that isn't as transactional maybe as it can come across, because that was a mistake I made early in my career, was, you know, trying to leverage people for what they could do for me. But, you know, when I say people are the key, what I mean is that, you know, we need each other. You can provide value to someone else. Someone might provide value to you. It might just be, you know, a positive, uplifting, very brief chat. But we need each other. We need to be amongst each other, and volunteering as an adult, I think, is one of the only ways into, you know, large groups of other adults. When you're younger, you've got, you know, sports and school programs, if you're in university, at classes. But, you know, after 30 or 35, you know, how do you get out and meet new people? You know, I think you volunteer.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell, you know, I'm a solopreneur, so I don't even have staff, right? It's just me.
Yeah.
And my business is home based. So I could literally sit here for hours, 8 hours a day, and not, you know, just through a camera perhaps, but not really connect with people. But I'm an extrovert. So like, I'm out there.
Yeah.
You know, I love to see, and whether that's virtual or not, you know, I thrive in this space. I've been in this space 8 years prior to COVID. So, you know, that wasn't, you know, video is not new to me, but I do like the connections, and I like the fact that everyone on here, you know, we've connected at some point. You know, seeing Ben again, I haven't seen Ben in years, you know, and Jillian I saw a few weeks ago, and we connected previously to that. So I like the fact that, you know, I look at my network, and I've been asked to speak about networking to international students and other community groups. And it's interesting what you said there, Nigel, because a lot of them are saying, well, like, I need something from somebody when I go. They're looking for a job. You know, they're seen as networking only, looking for a job. And I said, but you don't know what you might bring that person. Don't go in it always with what are you going to get from somebody else. Go in it with bringing your best self forward and what are you contributing to the relationship. And someone reached out to me yesterday, and we had a phone call, and I said, you tell me who you want to meet, and if there's someone in my network, I'll connect you. And I only know if I have that network through volunteering and through business, right? So it's that's how it grows, for sure.
Well, I have the ultimate connection. Hey, Carol. Carol had her coffee break during Winter Carnival at Pasadena Place.
That's right.
And she invited me, like she does, to all the sessions, because she knows my plan down the road is to start my own business. And at the time, I was a couple weeks before exams and things like that. And I just went in to meet people, not anything more than that. And right now, the lady I'm doing the work term for, I actually met at that meeting. We hooked up, started chatting. She was introduced to me by someone else that I knew, and they're like, oh, what are you doing? When I said I'm a student, she said, oh, are you doing a work term? And I said, well, I have to. She said, okay, well, you're going to do your work term with me. And I was like, okay, sure. And, you know, it grew from that. So right now I'm second week into a work term with someone that I would never have met unless I was at that meeting. So connections are real, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I get so excited. That just like gets me all. So I'm going to kind of shift now and wrap to the ending. So Laura Lee, is there any words of wisdom you'd say to anyone, or suggestions about this whole crazy world of entrepreneurship and volunteering and working and all of that stuff?
Somebody alluded to it earlier, but you know, I'll word it differently. Just be yourself in your business, be yourself in your volunteer work. I don't want to say don't overcommit yourself, because you already know that, but commit to those things that are truly your passions, because then you'll be adding in very valuable ways to your community, do things in your business that are truly you and your passions, and you'll be able to hopefully you'll be able to find success earlier on if you do that from the beginning.
Awesome. Richard?
I think much of the same. One of the things I learned through my 6 or 7 years back home in Cartwright is that you really need to treat yourself with care. And if you don't do that, and if you give too much of yourself back to your community, then it's leaving yourself and your family short. So I think I've learned that over the last few years. And if you align yourself with things that you're truly passionate about, you're not going to feel burnt out, and you'll know when you've gone past what your limits should be. And yeah, I'm almost 40 now, and I finally learned that. I wish I would have learned that a little earlier in life, but yeah, that would be the one parting comment for me.
Excellent. Nigel?
Yeah. Yeah, finding ways to give back that, sort of balance and fit with your life and your own goals and ambitions. Not overextending yourself, really what Laura Lee and Richard have said. And then, focusing on giving first and on relationship building first. In my experience, the benefits or the kickback or the payback from that is going to show up at some point, whether you search actively for it or not. So I think focusing on giving what you can of yourself is the priority.
Yeah, would totally agree with that. Thank you. So our next coffee break is in June, on June 15th, again, virtual. This one is going to be sponsored by Deer Lake Regional Airport Authority. Tammy Priddle is actually our guest as well. And the reason I've invited Tammy is I was at their AGM and facilitated a discussion for them back in May, or is this May? Earlier this month? Earlier last month? I don't know, whatever day it was. She talked a lot about, and what I was surprised about was that it takes 2 years to attract an airline or a route.
Wow.
And how much a business community can support her efforts in attracting routes. So there was a lot around, like, I'm thinking of you, Nigel, if you are planning an event in 2 years that you're attracting, this music festival or whatever it may be, or every year, that you're going to have X number of tourists coming in, or that you're going to have some professionals coming in for such and such. The airport wants to know, because they can build that into their forecasting, and they can build that into their pitches to airlines. And certainly we know that, a lot of the regional short-term routes, if we're talking about Atlantic Canada, have been changed, cut back, modified, and so on. So it was interesting to shift in my head. It wasn't so much how important the airport is to us. It's almost how important we as a business community are to the airport. So that was a bit of a shift for me. So I thought it was, so I asked her, and she's more than willing to come. And that's my very short version, but she'll talk a little bit more about working with the airport and the impact it has on our region from an economic development standpoint. So she is coming on in June 15th for that. Again, I want to thank Edwina, who obviously got caught up in her event, but Edwina of Avail HR was our sponsor for today, and she's located in Port aux Basques. And I think my last thing is just a little quick evaluation for me. If you can, again, either go to Slido or scan that code, or if it's already open, just do a couple quick responses for me. That helps me to continue. And as I said off the top, as long as people are willing to show up, I'm willing to be here and provide this platform. Laura Lee and I were chatting the other day, and we both feel it's valuable for entrepreneurs and for folks like Jillian and Amy and the others to see who's out here. And you don't always get to get outside of St. John's to meet us, Jillian, but you kind of get a sense of where some of these people are and what are some of the things that are happening. And certainly, Ben, for you on the Great Northern Peninsula, it's not something that, we can just drive up and have coffee with you in person. So I'm really happy you and Janice joined us today.
I wanted to mention this to Jillian. John George was my account manager when he was with BMO, so I was very, very sad to see him leave. But you got a good one, you have a good one in John George.
Excellent. That's great to hear.
Jillian, is there anything you wanted to jump in and add before we wrap up for the day?
No, I don't think so. Just thanks again for the invite. And I said BDC is part of the ecosystem. They're available to support. You know, we have financing advisory. If you're ever looking for something to do in all the free time we've been talking about, check out bdc.ca. There's lots of great content and free tools and resources there as well. There's free like marketing courses, financial analysis courses, those types of things. There's a load of great content there. So if you're ever looking for a particular need, just kind of have a search on our website and you might find some interesting info there as well.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So I think on that, I'm going to wrap it up, give you back 10 minutes of your day, folks. So thank you so much to our guests, Richard, Laura-Lee, and Nigel. Thank you for everyone that joined us today. The recording of this event will be posted on my social media and shared on my Spicer Facilitation Facebook as well, and probably on LinkedIn as well. And again, if you haven't yet, if you want to put your contact information in chat, then I will share that in my newsletter that I follow up with my network and get your name out there. So thank you, everyone. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and hopefully I'll see you in June, if not before. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.